In this week's video,
I cannot see what I'm doing, and probably neither can you, so I'm sure this is going to turn out great.
and now, vintage rotary phone blowout. At the beginning of the week, for you guys it'll probably be several weeks or months ago, my household decided to drop cable completely because they also provide us with our phone and internet, and we've been a customer for an extremely long period of time. They told us we have to upgrade our modem, which supplies us with our phone as well as our internet. And I feared, rightly so, that the new modem would have no pulse support or inferior pulse dialing support to the previous modem that we had had all these years. What's pulse dialing support? Well, pulse dialing support in a nutshell is support for rotary dials. The inside of a rotary dial mechanism is basically a couple of switches. One set of switches is basically normally open, these two right here, when the dial is not being turned or engaged, and closes when you start to turn the dial, and holds until the rotary dial returns to its rest position. This is hard to film one-handed. When you release the dial, this set of switches right here, which is normally closed, will pulse open one time for each position that you've advanced the number wheel. So if you dial a 1, this would pulse one time. This pulsed a lot more than one time because I dialed something higher than a 1. I can't see what I'm doing on the back side of the dial. So on old pulse dialing phones, each successively high number you dial gives a successively high number of pulses. Basically what it does is it shorts out the two conductors of the phone line and allows current to pass, and that can be sensed by the main office of the landline system or by your modem or whatever it is you're using to connect your phone into an actual phone system. An interesting thing about old rotary dial phones is that when you dial a 0, it doesn't do 0 pulses, it does 10 pulses. And this one actually has more than 10 pulses, and I have no idea what this was originally from. But it's a neat little doodad to have in my collection. So since I was worried I would lose support for pulse dialing, I went in and fixed and tested all of the old rotary phones I had accumulated over the past 3 years or more to make sure all the ones that did work before still worked, and to fix any and test any that I had bought without fixing or testing. These 3 are some of the main ones that I never really got to use before and ended up testing. This one I actually bought almost exactly a week ago, I believe. That's nice and shaky. At any rate, I fixed all of my rotary phones up before switching out to the new modem, well enough to test them, and was in such a rush to do it over the course of a few hours that I ended up not filming something that might have made good content. Right now, this video is an experiment to see how many of you actually care about this topic. And yes, this too is a rotary dial phone. The earliest slimline phones that were produced were actually rotary dial like this. So my fears were confirmed with the new Spectrum modem. The new Spectrum modem supports pulse dialing, but very, very poorly. Only 5 of the 20 functioning rotary dial phones in my collection can actually dial out on it. I've had to switch out all 3 of the main rotary dial phones I had in use for different ones that actually will dial out. So first we're going to look at something which is very common on 40s and 50s era phones, and is sometimes an issue on 60s era phones. A lot of them didn't have actual plugs on the ends of their cables to the wall. Instead, they would be hardwired into the wall. This phone was like that, and my solution, since its cord was still in very good shape and is a matching color that's not an easy color to get a hold of, what my solution was to use an old wall jack and wire the wiring from this phone into the wall jack. Now on these old rotary phones here, what you want to do is there'll be 3 wires, red, yellow, and green. You want to connect the yellow and green together to the green wire in the phone jack, and you want to connect the red to the red, and that'll give you line 1 calling when you connect a line between this jack and an actual wall jack that's part of your house, or phone modem, or whatever it is you use to get phone service to your vintage phones. If you happen to have 2 phone lines and you wanted to wire your phone to operate on line 2, I believe you would wire the red from this cable to the black on the jack, and you'd wire the yellow and green from this phone cable to the yellow on this jack. On older phones from the 1940s and 30s, and some from the 50s, oftentimes they would use rubber cords that would degrade with age. So stuff like this and this would happen, and leads would rot off on the ends. You can see the red leads rotted off this guy. When the main cord between the phone and the wall jack degrades, what I like to do is remove it entirely and replace it with a modern phone cord. I found one of the better sources for these is thrift shops. You can get a bag of like 4 of these sometimes for pretty cheap out here. Some of these phones I've already converted. This one I happened to find a monster cable DSL cord that was the same thickness as the original rubber line that came out of this phone that it replaced. Let's clear the unnecessary phones here and show how I do what I do. So we'll start with cord replacement, these phones, and progress to how to wire up phones that are missing parts, these 2. This phone here I rewired recently and had to go with a gray wire instead of black because I didn't have enough black at the time, and I just wanted to make it work and prove that it would work. This phone I rewired back when I was about 13 years old, so way decades ago now. This is the same phone that you see on the shelf behind Technology Connections on his channel. I've been using this phone as my bedroom phone for longer than his channel has existed. Mostly because this particular phone doesn't have an operational ringer, and when I discovered that fact after buying this phone, that was what clinched it as being my bedroom phone, since I absolutely hate being woken up by a phone bell ringing next to my head when I'm trying to sleep in. And you'll see the kind of sloppy workmanship I used to do back when I was an adolescent. Yeah, this used to be actually a pretty decent phone jack, but years and years have not been kind to this. It's just barely on here, and this cord is ugly. We're gonna switch it out for a black cord. First up, we're going to deal with prepping our new cords and selecting good new cords. This is going to be so hard to film without my tripod camera. So, let's just lop off one of the ends. I'm going to use a pair of scissors to try to split between the two colored conductors. Cannot see what I'm doing, and probably neither can you, so I'm sure this is going to turn out great. So we've done that. Is there any way I can force this to stay upright better? That works. Okay, so let's just probably gonna have to do a lot of editing to make this look okay. Come on, spit out the green conductor. There we go. Now what we're gonna do is just cut. Well, I was hoping that would peel a little bit better, but just use the needle nose pliers to hold this, and we're just gonna peel back about 2 or 3 inches, enough where we've got plenty of leeway to work with. Trim off the excess nub. Now we get to find out if the conductors in the inner 2 leads are the style I like or the style I hate for this application. I'll spare you watching me strip these with my teeth like a deranged beaver. These are stranded like lamp cord. Yeah, you can see that. These are my preferred type, although this isn't as thick of a strand grouping as some of the others I've worked with. These are my favorite style. I could cut open multiples of the other cords in the background to show you my least favorite style, but I actually have one here. Let me show you my least favorite style. This style, where there's about 4 strands, each strand has a cotton core that the copper double helixes around. I despise this style. I utterly despise this style with the cotton core. It's very hard to solder into a cohesive bundle. It's very difficult to work with, unless you're planning on using ends like this or special phone company crimping tools that I don't own. I don't feel like spending 2 figures on tools for something that I can do with the tools I already have, like this style of wire. So when I encounter the ones with the cotton core, I throw those away. Just track down more cables. The nice part is it seems like the cotton core became less common as DSL and higher speed phone modems became popular in the late 90s. So you won't find as many cords with the cotton core, especially in black. Let's get this phone open and show off my lousy adolescent wiring skills and job. This one, I believe, either had a cord or had the stub of a cord when I got it. It's been enough decades that I don't remember exactly what the case was, but I did open this a few days ago to enjoy my old hack wiring and see just how bad it is. And I will show you exactly how bad my wiring skills used to be. In fact, I can illustrate it with a story about an old beige desk phone that came from one of my grandmother's houses that didn't have any cable on it, and I wired it so poorly into the house system that we actually lost service for a while. Back when I was about probably 7 years old. This, when I was a teenager, was the extent of my wiring skills. Kind of a bit of a mess. And this is what's inside one of these phones. You've got a ringer, you've got a capacitor with a schematic and some information stuck to it because it was a nice large flat surface and they could. And we've got this transformer here. I'm going to show you how to make a phone work when it's missing the ringer, capacitor, and transformer. But first, let's deal with the cord on this. How in the Sam Hill am I going to do this one-handed? In case you're wondering why this is so sloppy, my one camera that could be mounted on a tripod died. So I'm filming this with my cell phone. So let's take a look at the full horror of how I used to do my phone wiring. Look at that, I just... Focus. I just twisted the wires together and put electrical tape over them. I was a real hack when I was a teenager. We all get better over time. So we've taken the old cord out of circulation there. I'm actually just gonna yank it off these wires. They're nicely color-coded so I can see what I did. And this is going into the trash because it's ruined and old and not old enough to be antique and interesting. I take off the old red wire and the green wire and replace them with the new red and green wire one at a time. I'm also going to, I believe I'm going to reuse this yellow wire here and use it to bridge to the green terminal. Let's just do things one at a time to get it cleaned up. I think if I brace you here, you can watch what I do. So, just kind of, I don't like the way I did the end hook on this wire, so I'm just gonna dress it up a little bit with my needle nose, and I'm gonna slip this spade terminal back in here somehow and try to hold it so you can watch what I'm doing. Okay, that deals with the red sufficiently. We're gonna take the green off next, and I'm also going to clean up this yellow wire I've got here. Yellow wire goes to terminal number 5 right there. You guys can remind me if I forget. Okay, so I accidentally somehow convinced my phone to stop filming. What we're going to do is we're going to twist these strands into a nice cohesive package on this wire. And we're going to do the same thing for the other end. And we're going to attempt to move the phone and film a little bit of soldering iron action. I should clean the tip with some fresh lead. That's pretty good. And just kind of slop a bunch onto the wire that we want to tin up. This up a little. That gets the wires nice and cleaned up. Here is just hook it back onto 5. Man, this is hard to do with one hand. And screw it down. Okay, so now we'll just wrap this around. Actually, we want to do it clockwise so that when the screw tightens, I really need both hands. I want to do it clockwise so when the screw tightens, it pulls the wire into the terminal rather than spitting it out of the terminal. That's always a good decision.
Samuel Adams, always a good decision.
Would you like something to drink?
I'll have water, please. Water for me, too, but with lemon, please.
I'll have a Sam Adams.
It's 9:30 in the morning. And don't you have an outstanding DUI? I'll have a Sam Adams, too. Samuel Adams, always a good decision.
Okay, that's good enough. And we've cleaned up the wiring on this pretty nicely and installed a nice black cord. Let's get this reassembled and tested out. Man, we got no light here. We're gonna plug it in anyway. I at least have enough light that my eyes can see, even if the camera can't see that well. Don't know if you can hear the dial tone, but I'm trying. So, yeah, we got dial tone. This thing works. I can't test if it dials out because this is one of the phones that the new modem will not allow to dial out. In fact, there used to be a very nice wall phone mounted to this wall jack that I installed here in the basement. Completed this phone here. I'll just set it down for temporary. This black Western Electric wall phone came from my grandma's house. I've had this since I was a wee tyke. That sounds wrong. I've had this since I was a very young kid, probably like 5 to 7 years old, something like that. This is the phone that woke me up the morning of 9/11/2001 when the World Trade Centers fell. I had this hanging up in my bedroom in on another wall outlet that I installed myself, and this thing kept ringing and ringing that morning, and I've always had it in service wherever I've lived, and I had it in service for a good while before then. As a kid, I actually had an easier time learning how to dial a rotary phone than I did the modern touch tones of the time. I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other phone on this phone with one of these 3 new black cords. I'm not going to show you that and bore you with it, but since I haven't done a lot of rewiring on phones since I was a teenager, and I wasn't good with figuring out how to deal with the ringer, the transformer, and the capacitor being missing on a phone, I had at least 3 phones like this one and this one that were missing those components that I didn't know how to make work. Earlier in the week, when I was frantically making all my phones work before the good modem went away, I figured out on this phone how to deal with the transformers and the ringers being missing. This thing had 4 wires coming out of it for a separate ring box that would have also had the transformer and some other bits that I never got with this phone, and I figured out how to rewire it. However, this one's internal wiring and layout makes demonstrating that visually difficult compared to this phone, so I'm going to explain that procedure on this phone after I've changed the cord on this guy. Okay, so this is done, and I just tested it and it works fine. So perfect. Now to show you how to wire this. So this cool old Stromberg Carlson phone used to be part of an old TV. You're upside down?
This cool old Stromberg Carlson used to be owned by an electronic repair shop, according to this tag, which is pretty neat. This phone's missing a lot of its internal workings, so I'm going to show you how to make it work with just a handset, a hook switch, and a rotary dial. It won't ring, of course, because there's no ringer in it, but in a nutshell, what you do is this hook switch is closed when the phone is off the hook and open when the phone is on the hook. What you do is you put the hook switch in series with one of the two wires coming in from the outside. So, this phone has no ringer, and I don't have parts to add a ringer. I also don't have the impedance matching transformer. How I wired it up to make it work is you want one of the two wires coming in from the wall jack to go through the hook switch, the handset hook switch that you set this down on top of. Basically, this switch right here that you would hang the phone up on. That disconnects everything when you hang up the phone. It's this little switch right here. And that switch is this wire on the green in this particular case, how I wired it, and the other used lead from that hook switch comes over to this terminal and goes over to the pulse contacts on the rotary dial. The center terminal that bridges the normally open pair of contacts to the normally closed pulse switch contacts goes to this black lead, one of the three leads on the headset, and the white lead of the headset returns to the red wire. The schematic of it is this. You have three wires that come from the handset. This guy. You have the earpiece, the common, and the mic lead. The common lead connects to one terminal on the mic and one terminal on the ear. We do not use the common in this wiring scheme. We only use the ear and the mic leads. You can actually test a handset that is disembodied from its phone by simply connecting ear and mic leads to the wall jack directly. You won't be able to hang up or pick up, but you can hear the dial tone. I take back the part about being able to pick up. If you leave one of these leads disconnected, use a second phone on a different line to call the line that you're connecting the handset that you're testing into, and then you clip the one disconnected lead of the handset up while you've got ring. It should pick up, and you should actually be able to test both the ear and the microphone of the handset that way. So basically, the hook switch disconnects everything when the phone is hung up. When the phone's not hung up, it will connect everything. The rotary dial switch has a normally closed pulse contact and a normally open contact. Basically, what happens is that when you're not dialing, the signal will come in through the wall cord, go to the handset, come back from the handset, go to this center wiper, then go through this pulse wiper, back up to the hook switch, and back up and out the wall jack. If you do dial, what ends up happening is that the normally open contact closes and it shorts the handset out so that the handset is connected from here directly to here, and you won't hear anything in the handset.
The here. Obviously, it was like an intercom, because look above you.
There's a dial tower.
No, there isn't.
Should I push the page?
No. Look up. It's an intercom.
You want to do that if possible, because if you don't, and you just connect this wire from the handset directly to the hook switch, when you dial, you'll hear a series of loud clicks in your earpiece that will be somewhat deafening. The rotary dial can operate without the handset even existing, and all it really does is short out the this lead of the wall cord to this lead of the wall cord. It shorts it out when you wind up the dial, and when you release the dial, it opens the normally closed pulse contact a certain number of times, the number of times corresponding to the number you're dialing. One thing you might even realize is that some phones that were made without any kind of dial, there actually were some made like that, and some phones that predate rotary dials, you can actually dial them on a properly functioning pulse dial modem or landline. You can actually, in a pinch, if you don't have a functioning rotary dial, you can actually tap out the number you want to dial on the hook switch and dial that way. Some old-timers used to do that as a workaround for phones that had locks on the dials or didn't have dials. So that's, in a nutshell, how you make a phone that is missing its impedance matching transformer and capacitor and ringer work without those components. As long as you have the components this phone has, a hook switch, a dial, and a handset, you can make an operational phone. Some old-timers may criticize me for not having the transformer. It probably is useful for impedance matching when you have twisted pair phone service with a normal landline that doesn't go through a modem, but I haven't had one of those in many, many years, and I found that it isn't essential in my case to have the matching transformer. Interestingly enough, pulse dialing lasted well into the touch-tone era. Even when I was a kid, you could get landline service that didn't include touch-tone dialing. How touch-tone dialing works is basically any button you push will engage two different tones at the same time. I'm sure you've heard it plenty of times in movies, and I think Google, even on Android phones, current dialer will actually make those noises when you push the buttons to dial a number manually. Basically, there would be 3 different tones for the vertical row on a push button phone, and 4 for the different tones for the horizontal. When you push a button, it would switch it would switch the tones from the intersecting lines of the grid simultaneously into the line. Well, a lot of early touch-tone phones into the 90s had a switch on them that would select between pulse dialing and touch-tone dialing. And in pulse dialing mode, when you push the buttons on a push-button phone, it would actually create a series of pulses that would imitate the pulses the old rotary dial would create, thus allowing touch-tone compatible phones to also be compatible with old pulse-only dialing systems that were actually still not uncommon into the 90s. One last cool thing I'd like to show you before I leave. This is a turn of the last century, like early 1900s, phone ring voltage generator. And I've got it hooked up to this phone here. I can test telephone ringers with this. Ring voltage for telephones is about 90 volts at 25 cycles per second. So if I crank this handle real fast, I'll get this phone to ring. Gosh, this is hard to do one-handed. That should hold it down. If it would just give me enough reach.
And to prove to you that I am not lying to you about it being 90 volts, this is a 120 volt Christmas light, C9 style. We're gonna quick plug it into the wall right here to light it up to show you. And we're gonna hook it up to the ring voltage generator. 90 volts, 25 hertz won't kill you. It just hurts. Heck, they used to use it as a torture method during the Second and possibly First World War, and possibly other wars. They'd take a field phone and hook it up to somebody that they'd be interrogating and do this. I think you can see it lighting up. Yeah, if you work on live telephone wiring circuits, be careful not to touch both terminals at the same time, because if someone happens to call while you're working on it, it can hurt a little bit. One thing you can do if you want to use vintage telephones without hooking them up to a phone carrier is you can make a very simple intercom with two vintage telephones. All you need to do is take the two wires that come from the two different phones, connect one wire directly from phone to phone, and connect a 6-volt battery in series with the other wire between the two phones. And that will be sufficient such that if you pick up both phones at the same time, you can use them as an intercom. The setup's actually ideal for phones that predate rotary dials, and any dialing system for that matter. The earliest phones that used a crank handle to generate a ring voltage to ring the operator are great for this because they will one phone can actually ring the other by using its ring crank, and vice versa. I don't happen to have a pair of those, so I've never been able to implement that, but if you've got a ring box like I just showed you, and a phone without a ring crank, and a second phone with a ring crank, you can definitely implement this scheme and have ringing capabilities. Or if you happen to have two of those old school ring generator. So that concludes my rotary phone blowout video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like to let me know. Consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching.